Good afternoon. Thanks for hanging in. I'll just ask our panel presenters to join me on the stage, and there's lots of room. And I want to begin the presentation by acknowledging the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation. And I understand we have some planes to catch, and we only have an hour, and we wanted to engage you, so we want a lot of questions from you. So we're going to try and shorten things up, so to speak, and ask that each presenter maybe, within that 5 to 7 minute range. We have with us today Jake Linklater, Wiisag Chippewas of Nawash, Unceded First Nation. Jake is the president and co-founder of Long North Capital. Brenda Zurba, Ojibwe, Tribal Witch-a-Wewin Capital Corporation. She is the vice president of sales, marketing, and development. Annalise Kibler from Aurora Cannabis, and she's the Director of Regulatory Affairs. David Sharpe, CEO of Bridging Finance Incorporated. Alison Gordon of 48 North, where she is the CEO. And Michael Johnson is filling in today for Chief Lester Anoquot. And Michael is the president of Across the Country Cannabis Insurance Solutions. So I am going to, I understand Alison has a plane to catch. Okay, so I think, and I think we, maybe there's some themes we're hearing from throughout today. One of them, are we a little late to the party? It seems to be a highly regulated, but joint ventures are still happening. We're still finding our way around these things. We're not. And we're bringing in people that have a great knowledge of experience to show us the way. So with that, Alison Gordon, please come up.
I know. I just found out. Hi. So first I want to start out by acknowledging that we are currently on Algonquin territory. And I also want to say that I think some of us thought we were just part of a panel conversation, which we will be, so maybe less prepared to speak, in terms of a presentation. So I'm just going to speak casually about 48 North and some of the work that we've been doing in partnership with Indigenous communities. Essentially, 48 North, we are a licensed producer based in Ontario. We actually have 2 licenses. One of our facilities, Delshen, is in Northern Ontario near Kirkland Lake. And we just acquired a second facility from a company called Good and Green, which is in Brantford, Ontario. So really the history of 48 North and Delshen, which predates me, does involve a lot of partnership with Indigenous communities from an economic development standpoint, which I think has been mentioned today, that's been a lot of the ways that Indigenous communities have been involved as investors. And I think this is really important and amazing and something that everyone here should be proud of, because a lot of that investment has led to the evolution of the cannabis industry as we see it today. Without that funding and the belief in what these companies were doing, you wouldn't see us existing. So that really is a critical piece of this industry, which I haven't heard mentioned today, but I think is something that's very important to recognize. So we have our 2 facilities, and as I said, the first facility being in Northern Ontario, and because of the fact that we worked very closely with 49 different Indigenous communities to build the company, 2 of those communities are located quite near us, which are Waguchig and Matachewan, and we actually have had community benefits agreements with those communities, providing financing for education and outreach, which I think is a critical part of what we should be doing as an industry. We also have preferential hiring for Indigenous communities surrounding our facility in Northern Ontario, and also we believe that this partnership is critical to our success and what we want to do in the future. So very quickly, we are hoping to have a third license very soon, which would be near our Brantford facility, and it is an outdoor facility. So in June, the federal government announced that they will be allowing outdoor cultivation, and we were very excited to hear about that and have actually submitted an application to have a 100-acre outdoor farm in Brantford. And that facility and outdoor location is very close to the Six Nations, and we plan to have preferential hiring and community benefits agreements out of that facility as well. So the last thing I want to speak about is that we are working with a partner sitting right here, Mr. Wade, if you want to wave your hand, from Cree to develop an accreditation program. We believe that we should be encouraging more licensed producers to partner and do things like having preferential hiring for Indigenous communities. And we want to give accreditation to those licensed producers who are doing that. So we look forward to unveiling that in the coming months and hoping to get other licensed producers on board as part of that program to be able to give back to the community, and also for consumers to be able to recognize those companies that are doing that and be able to vote with their dollars by rewarding those companies who are partnering with communities. So thank you.
Thank you, Alison. Next up, I think we're going to hear from Brenda Zurba, and she can enlighten us on some of the joint ventures that they've seen at Tribal Witch-a-Waywin Capital Corporation, and some of those loans out there, particularly for our entrepreneurs.
Thank you, Ray. I'd like to acknowledge that we were on Algonquin territory today, as well as all of the elders and the leadership in attendance from all over. My name is Brenda Zurba. I'm the Vice President of Sales, Marketing, and Development for Tribal Witch-a-Waywin Capital Corporation. Tribal Witch-a-Waywin was established 25 years ago as part of the government's program to address on-reserve lending. When it first began, before my time, they received $3 million and had 3 employees. 25 years later, we are sitting as a ISO certified organization. We have circulated $2 million in loans collectively to the First Nations, as well as $45 million in short-term personal loans. And we have 200 employees across several lines of business. When we first started in 1993, we were 100% reliant on government funding. And today, we receive 0 funding from the federal government. Everything that we do is from our own revenue. And the key to success in everything that we've done has been through partnerships and joint ventures, and with a key and an eye on partnering with industry experts, whether it's a call center or getting into the pension benefit, property casualty business, the micro lending to combat all those payday lenders out there. We have partnered and joint ventured with industry experts to build capacity, to gain industry expertise, and then either continue on the partnership or to buy them out and take it over 100%. We look for partners, as I said, to build capacity, and more importantly, partners who are willing to transfer knowledge so we can do it ourselves and learn how to do it well ourselves. This has led us to build our own IT infrastructure our HR department, as well as incorporate training programs for all of Manitoba First Nations. What we've done is then decided, since we've built this infrastructure, how can we service other communities in the same way? So we have taken our expertise, our partnerships that we have built over the last 15 years, and we've gone out and we've partnered with other communities and other Indigenous organizations to help them negotiate joint ventures, to source partners, source financing, and bring them into these economic opportunities that are evolving all over Canada. Sorry, I lost my place in my notes here. So the mandate for TWCC began with doing developmental lending, but has expanded into helping communities with projects like build commercial malls, negotiate a joint venture for pain clinics in Manitoba. You know, I heard earlier today that, you know, from a number of people that, you know, they seem to maybe have missed the boat, so to speak. And, you know, this is just the tip of the iceberg. You know, the LP business that we're hearing and the retail business, that's just the tip of the iceberg. When you look at this market and the opportunities that are available in terms of oil and other ancillary products and spin-offs, the opportunities are endless. And Ray had asked me to give this example. We negotiated a partnership with a clinic network that will be going public soon. And our First Nation client is a 49% owner of 2 clinics that are currently being built in Winnipeg. So that's just one of the opportunities. Again, partnering with industry experts. This clinic network, they're bringing in 2 specialists from the UK who are specialists in rheumatoid arthritis and pain management, and also harder opioid dependency, ending and helping sort of end those within certain clinics. So I'd say, you know what, the opportunities, just have to look outside and talk to people and source the right partners. And there is funding, whether it's private funding or, you know, we heard earlier from Christian Sinclair from Opaskwayak Cree Nation. There's other sources of revenue that can be used to move your community or your organization ahead. So again, thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Brenda. Yeah, I believe in chivalry, so it's going to be ladies up first. So next we have Annalise Kibler. She's with Aurora Cannabis, based out of Edmonton, Alberta, and very near or right next to the international airport. So if she has to get out of town real quick, she's right there to do so. She is the Director of Regulatory Affairs, so I know regulation in the cannabis industry, you've really got to know your stuff. So Annalise, please enlighten us.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a little bit last minute, so I don't have a presentation prepared. However, I'm very happy to come and discuss the opportunities of the cannabis industry within Canada and as well and beyond. My background is actually in medicinal plant species, and I've been working in the legal cannabis industry for just about 5 years now, in a variety of different roles. And through that time, an opportunity to work within the 4 regulations we've had in 5 years and determine how to apply that to the cannabis industry. So we've dealt with a lot of change and a lot of growth. When I started at Aurora in 2015, there was 35 of us, and now we just hit 2,000 people as employees for our company. So the rapid rate of growth of the industry is just so mind-blowing, but it also leads to so many new opportunities, which can be led in both the regulatory stream and having a good understanding of what is going on and what the changes are happening. And I do really appreciate Jennifer's presentation prior to this. It's hard to make licensing and regulations easily digestible, but I think she did a really good job. But just looking kind of at the new regulations of the transition that we saw in October and how that really can impact the ability for more individuals to get involved into the industry. What we're seeing is a breakdown in the supply chain, as well as the opening up of new opportunities within Canada and the world. Up until 2017, Aurora had one licensed site. Through the past couple of years, we now have 8 licensed facilities with more on the way. In addition to now going from having, exporting to one country to now being involved in 22 international countries. So there's such a huge opportunity right now in terms of new evolution within the industry beyond even within Canada, but also looking at how the supply chain's being broken down to improve the ability for individuals to get involved. So I think some of the key things from like our perspective as Aurora, but also just as people passionate about the industry, are some of the new opportunities when it comes to things like hemp. Like Jennifer was mentioning earlier, is now has the ability to work with licensed producers. The industrial hemp regulations have been modified to incorporate within the cannabis regulations, which allows the ability for hemp farmers to have easier access to product, easier testing requirements, easier facilitation, but also allows them to work with licensed producers like ourselves to facilitate the extraction of CBD isolate or CBD resin for the production of new products. I'm sure you all know there's supply shortages, but there's also a huge opportunity, as we see in the regulations and in how other countries have evolved or how different states have evolved, that there will be new opportunities for CBD in a potentially more of an NHP or wellness standpoint. So the hemp farming is going to be a huge opportunity to kind of facilitate the infrastructure for facilitating those new opportunities in the upcoming years. Looking forward as well, we're also seeing a huge opportunity with the new research licensing requirements. Things like doing research trials, having multiple sites where you can conduct research at this, on different protocols, clinical trials. These opportunities for research, again, have a little bit less of a regulatory burden when it comes to the actual infrastructure requirements and more in the practice and the protocols, and are so key for our country to continue to evolve the cannabis industry and be a forefront on the international markets as well. In addition to this, we also obviously see the supply chain. Things like dispensaries or retail cannabis stores are now opening up, which is a huge opportunity. I fortunately get to work with each of the provinces, which is an interesting relationship as they're trying to learn the new system and the new regulations and the new understanding of this industry and how they are already evolving so rapidly to adapt to a growth of an industry so fast-paced. So how they are now taking on, we've already seen a lot of changes since October, just working with them directly, and how they're viewing cannabis and how they're changing their attitudes towards cannabis. So, although I think there's been mentioning of it's too late, absolutely not. There's so much new opportunity for cannabis. It's just a matter of kind of seeing how these, not only the regulations, but also how the mindset of the country is changing and how that's allowing for new opportunities and the opening up of the new future of cannabis, even within Canada, but also in other countries as well, which is an amazing opportunity.
better pick it up.
Thank you, Annalise. Yeah. So yeah, great opportunity still out there. And I think to assist us with that, we also need financing. So we have a specialist here, and Mr. David Sharpe, who is the CEO of Bridging Finance Incorporated, can come up and share with us some of his ideas.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Great to be in the territory. Just got in from Denver last night in the wee hours, so I was going to do some slides, but I don't have any. We are a finance company, Indigenous-led. I'm a member of the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte, Tyonega, and we're Canada's largest private debt corporation, meaning we lend out money and we try to get it back. That's always key to private debt. For us and what we do, about 25% of our business is with First Nations in Canada, and we're committed to that. We're 34 people at Bridging Finance, and we have 3 Indigenous people, myself and 2 others. And that's very important to us. What we're trying to do is kick down doors for our people, for our First Nations, Métis, Inuit organizations. And we think we're doing that effectively. So along came Cannabis, and I've said this before, and some of you may have heard, along came Cannabis, and we said, well, this is an opportunity. I was not inclined to get into cannabis, I have to say. We're busy enough doing fisheries with the Inuit, doing housing with First Nations, doing renewable energy. But it's an opportunity. And when an opportunity like this comes along, you have to capture it. And others have said here that it's not too late. It is not too late. When you look at regulation in Canada, and especially on the retail side, of course, we're still figuring it out. So if we're still figuring it out, the opportunity exists, of course. So we have partnered with First Nations on the cannabis front. Again, if it wasn't for the First Nations involvement, we wouldn't be in cannabis. For me, it was just, we're too busy doing other things, but if we can help the lives of our communities and have economic development for our communities, that was key to us. So what we did is we went out and we started talking to people. We said, our doors are open, and we will partner with First Nations. And as we know, when you look at partnerships and joint ventures and all of those things, it's very difficult. You know, when the hardest thing about partnership is people and relationships and spending time. And then you layer on the complexity of First Nations, and we have our cultural practices, our ceremonies, chief and council, elders, and it's this whole other layer of complexity for Bay Street and Wall Street. But for us, we thought we had a natural advantage just because of our know-how in working with First Nations. So we've partnered with a number of First Nations, Peguis, and Brenda is here on behalf of her organization, and Peguis as well, the largest First Nation in Manitoba. That's our partner. Rama is our partner on cultivation and retail, along with Peguis, and all 13 First Nations in Nova Scotia. So we have a state-of-the-art facility in Halifax, 51% owned by First Nations. So when we go and do deals, we just don't want to lend the money to the First Nation, non-dilutive debt. We insist that the First Nation have ownership. And really, that's how we're going to improve our lot in lives, and how we're going to compete or partner with corporate Canada is by having equity. And you know, the days of royalty agreements, they're fine, they're great. I think they're long behind us in a lot of respects. As First Nations, we should demand equity. We should demand ownership, because if you're doing anything in Canada and you don't involve First Nations, you potentially will have some issues with your business. So when you look at the cannabis opportunity for Bridging Finance, it's hard to believe. I was looking at the numbers on the plane coming here. We've done $250 million now in cannabis, and about half of that is with First Nations. And that's significant. That will tell you our alignment with First Nations. I was speaking to some of the folks in Denver yesterday, and I said, if we fail, we all fail, meaning we will fail the First Nations. When I talk about Denver, the reason I bring that up is our partner, we have a cannabis partner who is the longest growers in the United States, and arguably have grown more cannabis than anyone else in the world. They're called Mjardin, M-J-A-R-D-I-N. And so we've partnered with them, we've financed them as well, And these are the folks, when I went down to Denver, Colorado a couple years ago to talk about cannabis, I was invited down. My only question to them was, how do you feel about First Nations? Will you do business with First Nations? And you're looking at all these folks, 350 people in this corporation, very accomplished growers. And the answer within a nanosecond was yes. We will partner, we will come, we will have turnkey cultivation operations in Peguis and Rama, with the Mi'kmaq, in Nova Scotia, and more. We're wanting to partner. We're open for business. As mentioned, in any partnership, it takes work. And I would say the opportunity, and I don't want to repeat myself too much, but I have to emphasize this, the opportunity exists for our nations. We have certain advantages when it comes to cannabis. And we do all the meetings with communities when we go in. We have to be invited in. I'm not going to call you up and try to sell you anything. It's just not the way we work. It's not the way First Nations work. We get invited in, we meet with chief and council, we meet with elders, and then we go to the community for a vote. We did that in Rama. I think we did 2 or 3 votes. How many in Peguis? There's lots. But people always criticize us as people and as communities and nations, saying we're slow, we're slow. We're getting faster, I'll tell you that, because we have to seize the day. And we're getting better at business, and we're competing. So the message here is work at your partnerships, don't give up. There's tons of retail opportunities. And when you look at, I look at these numbers all the time, cultivation is great, and we want to control the supply chain, absolutely, from seed to sale. But the real juice in a lot of respects for our communities and the real opportunity, I believe, is retail. And I'll leave it with this, and I say it every single time I speak, and there's probably government people here in the audience. If we're not included in these discussions on retail, we are sovereign nations. We will sell cannabis. I was going to say tobacco. We'll sell cannabis. It's just another commodity. We have to, and I go around, I talk to these premiers, talk to the premier of Nova Scotia, Ontario, and it takes a lot of meetings. They put up the hand. No, there's going to be no First Nations licenses. But we keep at it. We lobby them. And one good argument is you have an opportunity to regulate it now. And if you don't take that opportunity and be fair to the First Nations and partner with us in our communities where there's lots of poverty, we are sovereign nations. We will go out and we will sell, and we'll make money for our communities and programming. And my community, Tyne-and-Egg, is a good example. I was there last week, and I lost count at the number of retail stores in Tyne-and-Egg. I happened to go in a few of them. I wanted to see the quality of presentation, the quality, dare say, of the product. And pleasantly surprised, in the sense that these are professional operations, but that will happen across the country unless these provinces understand that we got to be invited to the party. I'll leave it at that, but partnership's important. We are good at partnering as First Nations, and don't give up on that. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And next up is Jake Linklater, and maybe share with us some expertise on medical marijuana and joint ventures around that. So, Jake?
Again, I acknowledge and very happy to be here in the Algonquin territory. I wanted to acknowledge a couple of our future partners that are poised to join Wiisag from the Saugeen First Nations. If you want to stand up, Mike Henry and Mark Mandawab. You've already heard us welcome our international partners from Jamaica, their Ive and Hopeton. We felt it was important to have those people come to this conference and be acknowledged and recognized and welcomed, and very excited that we're very close to implementing our strategy. And our strategy was about relationships. Some people call them joint ventures, some people call them partnerships. Ours is about relationships, and as David said before, we in our partnerships, in our relationships, ownership's very important. Building trust is very important. That's what we've done here at Wiisag. One little correction, I know that the moderator had said I'm from Long North Capital Group. That is another business that I'm part of, but I'm here as Wiisag. Wiisag started down this journey a couple years ago. We've learned a lot, but I'm in agreement that there is so much opportunity. Our focus, again, is about relationships. Our partners are 51% owners of the license. We do provide services. We have gone out and found growers. We've found growers that have been in the shadows for 30 years, but we've brought them into the light because we were looking for boots on the ground experience, people and individuals that could bring that knowledge of growing in the bush, along tree lines, wherever they grew. We needed that type of capacity and knowledge so that we could share that and develop the same type of knowledge and capacity with our partners. We're hoping to gain a lot of knowledge from our partners from Jamaica. I hear they grow very good product. I don't know if that's true or not, Ive, but that's what I hear. I'm going to keep my time short. Again, very, very honored to be here at the second conference. I was out in Alberta to participate in the first one and look forward to answering your questions, talking to you all. The other person I wanted to acknowledge, I hope he can stand up because he's kind of vertically challenged, is my business partner, Joel Strickland. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. Yeah, insurance is a huge part of this industry, as it is with life, and with us today. And thank you, Michael, for filling in for Chief Lester Anoquot. And come and tell us a little bit about the insurance industry as it relates to the cannabis industry.
Ladies and gentlemen, again, I would like to acknowledge and thank the Algonquin territory for hosting. That's fantastic. Thank you very much. We are here to introduce and to launch our insurance program across Canada, partnering with First Nations, partnering with Indigenous communities. We have been insuring communities for the past 20 years through municipal style insurance. When they came to us and they said, we're thinking about this opportunity for cannabis, we said, you know what, help us to support. And this is what we've done, we've accomplished. We've been able to get the Canadian insurance marketplace and actually abroad even into the UK that has come aboard because it is Indigenous. The couple of things that I want to discuss with you is that, well, first and foremost is that we are doing this. This is a live program. It's not something that we're still thinking about. We have bound policies, we have bound programs, so this isn't this is beyond, I guess, functional or theoretical. We have the limits that is required by the Government of Canada and the Ontario, BC, different provinces that require the product recall. We do have the liability which is required. But beyond that, we also have the directors and officers, which would include what we would call reputational risk. So this is where we need to, and we would like the First Nation chief and councils, that if they are in any sort of wonder or wondering about conflict, with the product or something of that nature, that there is insurance that is possibly available. We also have, as I said, the property and that sort of thing as well. So it is a very well-rounded program. And we like to bring this and we not only bring it to the First Nation, but in support of. And I think that's more valuable in working with you to make sure that everybody is covered through the joint venture from chief and council right through to the cannabis, as they say, seed to weed, right? So anyway, with that, thank you very much. And if you have any questions, be very, very happy to answer them. Okay, I better get this back. Thanks, Dave.
This is your opportunity to ask those questions. And I know it's had a lot of information and certainly a learning experience, especially for myself. We do have expertise and they want to share. So come up to the mics, state your name and where you're from and your question. And our panelists, I think, all have mics, so they can stay seated. And we'll get you an answer if we can. So, gentlemen over here first.
Yeah, I'm Eric Hobius. I'm with Pemazwin. My question is for Jake, because you've gone through this. The previous panel, they talked about surveying land and went through a municipal structure, and that doesn't apply, obviously, to First Nation land. Can you tell us sort of your experience with trying to do site selection for LPs and stuff? Because I think the room would benefit from that.
Sure, and I know that the reps that are coming in from the various communities across Canada, you know, it's not a perfectly sliced up or planned out landmass in your community or in your territory. So it's funny that it was brought up because we just mentioned it to one of the policy advisors in Bill Blair's office, is that generally speaking, you know, chiefs and councils do have, I don't like the word control, but some decision opportunities when it's, in my community, we call it band land. So I own a certificate of possession. I have my piece of beautiful property at the Chippewas and Nawash, or Nawash. And then right after that is band land. And then after that, my cousin has his lot. So in the guidelines and the regulations, it's very site-specific. It's one box, and you stay into that box, and that's where you get to play. But in our discussions with the communities, it's not contiguous, which is troublesome for the regulators at the federal level. So in our work with the federal regulators, we said, listen, we're going to give you geo-coordinates, because where we're planning on our sites is there's different locations. It's not all in one box. There's one box here, there's one box across the highway, there's a box beside the cemetery. You know, it's that type of understanding that we've been trying to inform our colleagues at with the regulators and the federal government, is that, you know, whoever had put this together, good start, but here's how it plays out on the ground. And so far we're finding flexibility in that with the regulators, but we do provide them the geo-coordinates of those specific site areas. So that is our solution that we've been brought up so far. No pushback, but as long as they know where you are and there's access granted to the sites, because that sometimes is an issue in communities as well, is I'll give you an example from my community. There's a standing band council resolution. No way anybody from the Ministry of Natural Resources in Ontario is allowed to step foot in our community unless the chief and council say you're allowed in. But that's a historical piece, right, around hunting and fishing and those type of things. So that's what we've come up with. And again, I think Canada is hearing some of the stories on the ground for communities that are well advanced into this industry when it comes to licensing and regulation. So that was our solution, other than saying, oh, we can only play in one box. Hopefully that.
Any other panelists want to share their experience? CO, CP? No? We're good.
I would just add that that's been our experience as well. Working with the nations, RAMA. Obviously, our first question is to the First Nation is, where do you want the facility to be? And then, as Jake was saying, you have to go through the regulators, but that's the starting point, is where does the nation want retail or cultivation?
Great. Okay, we have further questions?
Hi again, my name is Jordan Brandt from Tyne-Negamoot territory. So I just wanted to share a few thoughts that I had during this panel discussion, and I wanted to also thank each of the panelists for being with us today and sharing your expertise. It's definitely appreciated. Some of the concerns I have during these talks as an Indigenous person, I'm hearing lots of numbers being thrown around, 49%, 51%, 10%, 25%. My concern as an Indigenous person, and especially when it comes to considering an investment, for example, as any investment is a gamble. It's never a for sure thing, of course, as anybody who's ever invested in anything knows. And so when I'm hearing all these numbers being thrown around, and also the fact that there's future opportunities, I'm feeling that those opportunities being mentioned are corporate opportunities, and which is great for many First Nations who are interested in going national and going international and working with other countries and things like that. The panelists from Aurora mentioned they're working with 22 countries. That's fantastic. I'm very happy for you and for Aurora. It feels, though, very out of touch with what many First Nations in this country are facing, in which many are dealing with just day-to-day struggles, day-to-day living. It feels extremely out of touch to say that there's opportunities abound when those opportunities only apply to a small percentage of First Nations in this country. So if any panelists want to speak to that, please do. But that's just what my personal concerns are in listening to this panel. And absolutely, I believe that some other people in this room may share those concerns.
Thank you.
Oh,
Go ahead, Brenda.
Thank you for that comment. And I can see how, in some cases, people would feel that way. But I want to share some of my on-the-ground experience. So in some of our partnerships that we've worked with Peguis, yes, they are large. You know, they're equity positions, 51% of a production plant with Emardin, and a retail stores, 51%. But I'm also working with single First Nations that are small in Manitoba who want one little store by their gas bar and their tobacco shop that we do that work too. And we're working together for financing and getting them that opportunity to their community. So it's not an international play, it's not a national play, this is our community retail store play. We just need help building it and learning how to manage it. So that's just my own personal experience. It's what you want it to be and what kind of position that you want to play in or able to play in.
Thank you. Alison?
Yeah, no, I just want to add that one of the biggest challenges that the industry has is human capital. So you're talking about a new industry. You don't have people with a ton of experience who've worked for many, many years in the legal regulated market. Obviously, many have worked with cannabis for lots and lots of years, but it's very different when you're dealing on the legal regulated side, the way we grow, how we have to be compliant, all of those things. So I think there's a huge opportunity for everyone and anyone who's interested in this industry, also from a career and job perspective, that there just is. And again, being able to start in the early days of this industry, wherever there's that opportunity, and to be able to grow. I mean, I think you said yourself about Aurora, there was 35 people when you started there, now there's 2,000 and you're the head of regulatory affairs, and there are those opportunities as well. So I know there's a lot of focus here on investment, and no doubt the capital required to be a licensed producer or even in retail is maybe larger than some individuals might be thinking about, but I think there's still a ton of opportunity. That's what I would say.
Thank you. Annalise?
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that in terms of when I speak to people about cannabis industry, you hear a lot about either the retail front-facing, or you're a cultivator or grower or producer. In this industry right now, not only is the actual industry of growing and producing cannabis so new, but it's never been done in the world before. So all the ancillary business around this is so new and so opportunistic. We have an opportunity to work with people who had a really good idea about how to make a trimming machine. And there are a couple of guys in a garage, and they made a really great piece of equipment, and then we've been able to be like their first buyers and then elevate their industry by bringing in that technology into our facilities. The great thing about this is it's an opportunity as well. You're not looking at kind of the licensing challenges or the timelines that those might take, but they're opportunities of how to work within the cannabis industry and facilitate new opportunities of how we can do things better, how we can do it cleaner, how we can do it more efficiently, and really develop a new industry that's looking at new technology and new infrastructure from a clean, renewable source versus trying to adapt things from older industries. So there's so much new innovation on top of just handling the product itself.
Thank you, Annalise. David?
Great, thank you. Just want to shout out to Jordan. I do follow you. I don't know if I've shook your hand yet, but when I say that, I'm not stalking him on social media. And I know what you're up to, and you're doing great stuff. I just want to briefly comment on our philosophy, and it's whether it's right or wrong. I love entrepreneurs. You're an entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur. But we made a decision, and it doesn't mean we can't change this, but we were going to finance Indigenous organizations and First Nations, hunters and trappers organizations in Nunavut. And the reason we made that decision, and you might say we're crazy, but you go to some of the communities and you have that one person who owns the gas station, the convenience store, the smoke shop, and they're super wealthy, and they're not pouring any money back into the community. And for me, just philosophically, it's always bothered me when you see problems with the school, and then you have one family who's the richest family in the bloody territory. And so that's why you made that call and said, well, we're going to do the First Nations and try to work with them to create wealth that'll go back into programming. And not saying that entrepreneurs wouldn't do that at all. But what you're talking about is perhaps a form of microfinance. But when you look at our company, and this is not an advertisement for bridging, we will go to small loans and partner, having said what I said, with the First Nation, but we haven't taken it to individuals yet. But not saying we won't, because as mentioned, we want to have ECDEV, but we just want to ensure that money is going back into the communities. And I was speaking with Lorraine White earlier, and love what they're doing. And that's the commitment that we make as organizations, that X% will go as a royalty or whatever to the community because you're in their territory, right? So keep what you're doing, keep it up. It's great stuff. But come and talk. I mean, I know you've reached out to me, but the biggest thing is, let's have a chat. What is your business plan? And are you going to do something for our people? And I'm sure you would, right? Success by individual Indigenous people equals success for all of us.
Another question?
Yes, Miigwech, for your answers. My name is Craig Harrison from Garden River First Nation. This is more along the lines in the aspect of loans and terms and businesses that come into our communities, and I can bet you pretty much every community in here can attest to this, is in the past 10, 15 years since I've been on council, every single player that came into our community came in there with this idea of they're going to get rich off of us. And then it's been like that since the turn of the century. And with all these loans that you are proposing, our communities can't afford these loans. These loans are, you got to pay it back first before you'll ever make anything. And by the time you finally make something, the equipment that's there is obsolete and it no longer works. And then we're stuck with the cleanup. We're stuck with getting rid of all the crap that's left in our communities. That being said, how do we move forward in a way that isn't going to break our bank? It's not going to put us in a place where we're always struggling just to get out of that hole, because that's where we come from. We're coming out of these holes. We're still crawling out of that crab pot or whatever you want to call it. And it's like when you come in like with money's not a real thing. We all know that. It's gone out of your pocket. I can have it in my pocket today. It's going to be gone tomorrow. How do we keep that in our pocket so that it's there, and then whenever we need it accessible, we can use it? Because every community is struggling. You look up north, you just by we all sit here, we're all out here, we're all looking around, and everybody's up here having a great time. We got communities out north and they're hurting, they're struggling, they can't even get fresh water up there. And we're having out all these great conferences. But at the end of the day, my question is how do we sustain without going under? Because we don't have that type of money just readily available. I'm just going to tell you one scenario we had. We had a company come in a few years back, maybe 10 years ago. They wanted to use our land for these windmills. Of course, through the course of the windmills, it was going to cost them $85 million to build these windmills. So they wanted their money back first, and then after that, at the end of the day, with that project was going to be $140 million by the time they left. And out of the $140 million, we were going to get $3 million out of that, and they were going to keep the $63 million. So like those are the types of ideas I'm looking at. As investors are there for a reason. They're not there to lose money, and they're not there to break even. They're there to make money. We're trying to make money. We're trying to keep our communities flowing with a little bit of bankroll, so we're not struggling just to get clean water, you know. So what would be a good idea? How small can you do this to actually so it's beneficial? Not waiting 25, 30 years to make some type of investment into your community just to have it come back. Because I got kids growing up right now. I have one in university in Ottawa. I have one that's a year and a half away, and then I have one getting ready to graduate from grade 8. I work. I go to 2 jobs. I sit on my console back home, and I do that over and over and over again just for my kids so they can be comfortable. But we all can't be doing that, and we all aren't doing that, and we want to be doing that. So my question to you is, how do we do that? Where, is there a way to do a turnaround in immediate? Well, I guess you can't get an immediate turnaround, but a turnaround that's going to actually be beneficial to us, so we're not sitting there waiting for that to come back and help us out. Miigwech.
Thank you. Anyone from the panel? Jake?
Thanks. So one of the things that we thought long and hard, and in our other business that was mentioned, Long North Capital, we thought about that very question, because it is a kitchen table question. It's a bread and butter question. So one of the things that we brought over from Long North into Wiisag is we don't do loans. We help the community find the equity and find the capital that they need for the project. As far as what communities in our model and our structures, you get immediately. You don't have to wait 10 years, 5 years, 3 months. When the revenue comes in, it goes out. As far as how do you protect that, we also have structures like that we've used in our other business called Long North Capital, and we think it's a great structure, but we do set up structures that the community is involved in. And the very first question is, David, about land, where do you want it? That's one of our questions to the communities is, with this revenue, where do you want it to go? Do you want it to go to health? Do you want it to go to education, infrastructure? You tell us, we will bring in people that we work with to guide the community through that process, and that the money is there. As you say, I'm the same way. I have $20 in my pocket. I know it's going to be gone in about an hour when I go to eat something. But we want it to last generations. And one of the speakers thought about, why can't we think 500 years down the road? A lot of people think the teaching of 7 generations, but we do that. That's part of the thing that we do as Wiisag and coming in and forming our ventures, our partnerships, our relationships. So we really do think about community. And that's just based on my experience working for communities, with communities, over the years that I've been fortunate enough to work with communities, as a consultant or as an advisor or as a negotiator. But we do, just to answer that question, is we focus in on the community. We look at a community benefits piece.
No, I want to add something. I think it's really important to say, because, and it might not be a popular opinion, yes, there is a ton of opportunity, and I just said that in the cannabis industry, but I want everyone to recognize that it's an extremely competitive and capital-intensive business. So there's no guarantee of absolutely anything in this industry. I think Health Canada, if we're talking about within the current federal government system of regulation, I think there's something like 600 or 700 applications in the queue. And right now you have companies that, like an Aurora or Canopy, that have $5 billion, I'm not saying Aurora, in the bank. So, they own a lot of retail, they own a lot of cultivation. Canada is a highly regulated country, so again, not speaking to what may or may not happen in terms of your sovereign land, but in terms of what's happening around where we're located. So I just want people to understand that, because I feel like there's a lot that's been preached today about the industry and getting involved, and just know that if you're going to talk about becoming a licensed producer, there is a big risk involved in that, in terms of when licensing would take place, where the other companies that have already achieved big levels of capital and have large cultivations and all of that have gone to. So I think you just have to go in with eyes wide open, but recognize there's other areas of the business that aren't about large-scale cultivation or retail. I just had to say that.
Thank you, Alison. David?
These are great comments, and that question was so thoughtful. Thank you. When you look at any company across Canada and you look at their balance sheet, they always have debt on their balance sheet. We're lenders, and we recognize when you're dealing with First Nations, often there's no money in the bank, or very little, and they're struggling, right? So we said, what do you do? And what we often do in finance is we're generally about 10 years behind the United States with ideas, and you just research and you replicate. So we looked at some of the banking programs of the Canadian banks with First Nations, and we said, well, what are they doing, and how can we do it better? And to that point is, not all opportunities are created equally. And we're going to have people coming into our communities trying to sell us stuff all the time. I sit on the board of a community in the Ring of Fire, and so I vet all the opportunities for that community up there. And the crap I see coming through, oh my goodness. But no offense, Chief and Council, they can't vet those opportunities. They come fast and furious, right? And there's a lot of losers, money-making losers, in that lot that they're being shown. So that's one thing to be mindful of. So if a First Nation comes to us and they have an idea, we're almost like free consultants as partners, and they say, this is our idea, we want to start an airline. If you look traditionally, airlines, most of them fail. They really do. It's a scale game. And we say, well, we love you, we want you to make money, but we're not going to do an airline with you, right? So you need that trusted partnership. But what we do on the lending side, and I'll say it very quickly, is we charge interest, of course, but we don't take payment. And so we don't want to tap into the cash of the First Nation. That, to me, would would be a major problem. So we accrue the interest, as we say in our industry. We just capitalize the interest, and then we find the takeout. So we find another institution to take out the principal and the interest at 4%, and once you're revenue producing. And that's, you know, LC Pogtog in New Brunswick, they wanted a Loblaws, we built them a Loblaws. Because that is a money maker. If they're in that area of New Brunswick, everyone goes on reserve now to the pharmacy and the Loblaws because it's the best. So all the folks off reserve, that's a moneymaker. That's $1 million net for them right now going up. But we charged them interest, we didn't make them pay it. Bank of Montreal comes in, they take us out at a much lower cost of capital, interest rate, and now they're making money and they have a good facility. And again, just to state, every corporation in Canada has leverage on their balance sheet. It's part of doing business, but it's got to be smart leverage, right? You just don't want to throw money around to finance a losing opportunity. So that was a very thoughtful question, and I'm sorry to hear about that loan you got, and you know it's got to be equitable as well. So making $3 million on that, and the company's making all that dough, kick them off your territory. I tell you, that's just nonsense.
They didn't do
Awesome.
the deal. Yeah.
Good.
Okay, we have 3 minutes. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any, so I really want to thank the panelists for coming from all parts of the country to be with us today, and I hope you found this session enlightening. I know I did. You know, back to the last question, and I'm a board member on one of the Aboriginal financial institutions, and we just made a loan to an entrepreneur to open up a retail shop. And yeah, it's about mitigating risk and how you do that, research, education, but also forming a team around you of very experienced people, such as our panelists. And I think that's why these events are so great for the networking. But it's only going to work if you ask the questions, you come up and maybe even spend some time with them and say, hey, can you maybe help us out here a little bit, you know, for the long term? And I think you'll be surprised that a lot of these people want to help. They want to help us. So with that, I think, again, thank you. Thank you to the organizers of the event, and keep up the good work.
Hey.